back on the Zero Hour. I'm your host, Richard RJ Eskow. Media outlets that tell the truth always seem to be in danger in this country, and my next guest and his outlet are no exception to that. In fact, what recently happened to them is an interesting case in the state of independent media today. He's a friend of mine and a friend of the program. Max Blumenthal is the founder and I believe co-editor of the Grayzone, if I have that correctly, and the Grayzone.com is the website. And the Grayzone recently experienced what I would call a somewhat novel, not entirely new, but somewhat novel form of censorship, and I wanted to talk to him about it. So without any further ado, Max Blumenthal, welcome to the Zero Hour.
Good to see you, RJ.
Good to see you. And yeah, I first heard about it, I guess, on social media, but you guys did a fundraiser on GoFundMe to give some regular income to three young, I think they're younger, but three journalists who contribute to the Grayzone, who do great work. In fact, Kit Clarenberg is one of the three. You know, I've been following his stuff now for a while, and then something interesting happened. So tell us. I mean, I'm sure you've told this story a million times, but what exactly happened?
Well, yeah, we wanted to bring these three contributors who are so dedicated and hardworking on a more long-term basis, and a lot of people wanted us to do that. And we're really excited when we launched this at GoFundMe. They wanted to help the Grayzone expand. They wanted to support independent media. It was just all around a good thing. And we were totally transparent about what we were doing. But GoFundMe froze our fundraiser. And this was, after days and days of me asking why I couldn't transfer the money. They finally told us through some unnamed person, some kind of faceless person simply named Sabrina from the ironically named Trust and Safety team, that they had frozen our fundraiser due to some external concerns. So that's pretty frustrating to be told. Some outside forces are just preventing you from getting the money that these guys who are living on a shoestring need to actually live. And they weren't even telling the donors, people donating $20, $10, and sending us these effusive messages of praise and encouragement. They weren't even telling them that their money wasn't reaching us. And
we're talking about a lot of money. I'm sorry to interrupt, but as I recall, it was like $90,000 or something.
We had reached 90,000 by the point we were notified about this. And so we were kind of, there was a period where we didn't know what to do. There was a deliberation period, and people were still continuing to donate without knowing that their money was not reaching us. And considering the history of GoFundMe, we had to ultimately pull the plug, because GoFundMe back in 2022, it actually nearly stole $10 million from donors to the Canadian Freedom Convoy, the truckers who were protesting vaccine mandates in Ottawa. Whatever you think about that, what GoFundMe wanted to do was take the money for the truck for their protest and divert it to what they called established charities after the Canadian Liberal government of Justin Trudeau declared emergency law and began instructing banks on how to freeze money, take money from donors. That's just simply illegal. It's straight up theft. And it was only thanks to 4 Republican attorney generals in the US and senators threatening GoFundMe, because it's a US-based company, that they actually gave the money back, but they also blocked the money to the truckers. With us, we just said, we started telling them, like, if you are going to continue to hold the money, you must refund it. And we went to another site called Spot Fund, where we were actually able to speak to the founder of the site, who said, I don't see anything wrong with what you're doing, or why you would violate our terms of service. So they're actually transferring the money, and we went public with it. We went public, we're going public now about it on
Right.
0 hour, but I went on Glenn Greenwald's show on Rumble. I went on Jimmy Dore, and I think GoFundMe was shaken by the amount of bad PR they were getting by doing this. And they started telling reporters like Matt Taibbi, and they told Al Jazeera, which actually reported on this, that it was a completely normal procedure that they subjected us to. And it's just simply about trust and safety. That's not true. And we still don't know who the external concerns are, but I have some very good ideas about that. And, finally, I mean, this is something that's happened to other sites and continues to happen to other sites that actually disrupt the official narrative around international affairs and specifically around what the U.S. is doing abroad. The Cradle, which is a Lebanon-based site which covers the Middle East, was removed from Facebook last week. Mint Press News, they've been banned by GoFundMe. They were just removed from TikTok. They're banned by PayPal, and they never get an explanation. And they're just an independent anti-war website. And then we have our managing editor, Wyatt Reed, who I'm fundraising for so we can keep him on. He's been banned, completely blocked by PayPal and Venmo, because this all happened around the time that he was reporting from the separatist side of the Donbass region, where his hotel was shelled by the Ukrainian military. And he just happened to be 100 meters away from the shelling, so he was nearly killed. And then he's suddenly financially sanctioned. So something's going on here that, and it appears clear that that those external concerns are likely state entities that are at the heart of this censorship industrial complex, which is not just censoring the news or censoring social media, determining who can and can't be on certain platforms, who should be shadow banned and suppressed, but actually sanctioning American citizens and British citizens.
And, Max, it seems, as I recall, whether it was PayPal or another institution, and maybe a credit card company too, I can't remember, but I think Consortium News, which has also, independent information channels on foreign policy, military affairs, and so on of the U.S. They also were blocked in some way a year or two ago.
Yeah, they were banned from PayPal too for no reason. No, they never received any explanation. And they're run by Joe Lauria, who was the former UN correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, who's since broken.
And they reprint my stuff, for example. So,
it's a very credible website, especially because they publish your stuff.
Exactly. I mean, that's just instant street cred right there, and insider cred too. But the real story here to me is kind of terrifying. It's, what I keep thinking, what I keep describing in my own head is smiley face totalitarianism, in that, a lot of people, including, I would say, virtually 100% of the people listening to this conversation right now know about, what Republicans have done, what Ron DeSantis might be doing, what somebody else might be doing on the right side of the spectrum to suppress speech here or there. But when I say smiley face totalitarianism, what I mean is that for the first time in my ludicrously long life, I think, in the last few years, I've seen more and more people who fall into the category of liberal Democrats, with liberalism being always historically in this country giving lip service, at least to the idea of freedom of speech, not only supporting these kinds of draconian measures, and not only justifying them on the grounds of, well, it's private companies and you have to adhere to their terms of service, and if they don't answer you, that's too bad, because the free market, you can go someplace else, which is an ultra right-wing expression in and of itself. But they even often I find even gloating about it, as in, well, we sure got them. I mean, to me, one example of that was, my friend Matt Taibbi's interrogation in front of a House committee, where he was mocked and interrupted and insulted and degraded and not allowed to respond by Democrats. And then people were kind of cheering those Stacey Plaskett or whomever, those representatives on in social media. And to me, this is nothing short of chilling. And to me, what happened to you guys at the Grayzone is another example of that. The fact that, nobody is quoting Voltaire. I think it was Voltaire, right? I may hate what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. It's now, I hate what you say, so tough luck, pal. I mean, it's, am I wrong, you think, to be as frightened as I am? Because it scares the hell out of me.
The only thing you said that was wrong was that was a Voltaire quote, but it's attributed to Voltaire, although I think it's something that was said about his biographer. All I know is it's not Voltaire. But
okay, well, my bad. I guess,
but the sentiment behind it,
and they're going to block it for me now. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
The sentiment behind it is, the essence of civil libertarianism, and as it's understood in the U.S. And you're right that liberals who support the current incarnation of the Democratic Party are no longer civil libertarians as they used to be. They're not progressive when the First Amendment is concerned. Of course, it's true. Right-wing Republicans like Ron DeSantis, they're waging their own war on freedom of expression at a state level, trying to control curriculum, control what books children read. And, and a lot of that is also driven by parents. It's driven by the Republican grassroots. So it's taking on a different form there. What I actually find what liberals are supporting and doing more chilling, because they have granted the national security state the power, the opaque national security state, which is unelected and runs continuously through Republican and Democratic administrations, and essentially is the terrorist wing of finance, of the terrorist wing of Wall Street. It grants them the authority to determine what can and can't be said in our new digital commons, which are completely privatized. And the reason that they've granted that authority to the national security state is the same reason why many liberals cheered on the FBI and the CIA when Donald Trump was elected and turned to them as their protectors and also as the assailant against Trump, because the fear of populism, that's the fear of Trump, the fear of Brexit, the fear of any grassroots right-wing surge in the political realm has made liberals so scared that they want to actually remove that side of the political spectrum from public view by banning them on all of these platforms. And what they don't realize, and this is refused to accept, and this is something Matt Taibbi tried to emphasize in his testimony before the House Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government, is that leftists are being banned too. For example, Matt pointed out how supporters of Hugo Chavez, of the Chavista movement in Venezuela, were being banned on Twitter on the basis of their political views. Or we have the example through a Twitter file that Aaron Mate, my colleague at the Grayzone, obtained. The Ukrainian SBU security services told the FBI to present a list of accounts it wanted banned to Twitter executives, and the FBI did so, and Aaron was on that list. Twitter didn't comply, but this is how it works. Aaron is not a right-wing Republican, but he gets lumped in with all these other forces. Why? Because in Western liberal democracies, whether you agree with them or not, the right is kind of classified as a counter-hegemonic force. They're seen as dangerous because, for example, they are skeptical of NATO. They oppose the Ukraine proxy war. They are increasingly skeptical of federal law enforcement agencies. They hate the FBI. They're not big fans of the CIA either. So they're lumped in with the traditional anti-war left, which would be represented by the Grayzone in many ways, or Mint Press News. And we're all just getting shadow banned. I spoke last week, and the interview's up on our site at the Grayzone, or on our YouTube channel. I spoke last week to CJ Hopkins. He is a satirist and an author, American author, who lives in Berlin, Germany. And Germany is one of the most restrictive liberal democratic societies when it comes to speech. He is facing a 60-day prison sentence for the cover of his book, which is called The New Normal Reich. And it's basically a compilation of his columns lashing out at the COVID restrictions and lockdowns and mandates that he lived through for the past few years in Germany. And the cover of the book is a satire of William Shirer's The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which has a swastika on the cover, but that swastika is kind of embedded into a person wearing a face mask. So for that book cover, he is accused of celebrating a National Socialist organization. He's not accused of it. He's been convicted by a German court of celebrating a National Socialist organization, and he either has to pay a 3,600 euro fine or go to jail for 60 days. So he's going to pay the fine and leave Germany. And the way CJ puts it is the way you put it, RJ. RJ and CJ have a similar analysis. It's like happy face totalitarianism, that it's not going to be George Orwell's 1984 where we're going to experience a jackboot in the face stomping on our face for all of eternity. It's going to be a faceless Silicon Valley drone in an air-conditioned room in some office park receiving an email from another faceless drone in some national security agency telling him or her who to ban and disappear quietly with no due process for all of eternity. And that's what so many people are experiencing now, where the only place that they can reach out to other people and spread their message is through these privately owned companies, but they're not actually privately controlled. Mark Zuckerberg isn't actually calling the shots. None of these guys are. Langley's calling the shots. DHS is calling the shots. CISA, they have this, Center for Internet Security inside the DHS. And we don't even know no one knows who these people are, but they're deciding what we can see and hear. That's why Elon Musk is presented as the new Trump. He's like the new bad orange man, but he's not orange. That's why the New York Times runs exposés about him being a racist. That's why he's been attacked by the Anti-Defamation League as an anti-Semite, because he came in and ended the regime of the national security state, or at least suspended it temporarily. It ended the regime which was under the complete control of the national security state at Twitter, which was completely compliant to their demands. Now it may come back under his watch. He may do something even more sinister because he's gathering so much private data of so many private citizens. But he got rid of, for example, the state-affiliated media labels, which were used to basically blacklist anyone who worked for a state media outlet from a non-aligned nation, a country that wasn't aligned with NATO. And then they were shadow banned. People who tweeted from those accounts, no matter how many followers they had, their tweets would be suppressed. The same thing still exists on all the other social media platforms, but he ended that. And I can just say from my own experience, I was shadow banned on Twitter. I had before Elon Musk was in charge, I had well over 300,000 followers, maybe 350,000. And, I was reaching very few people. Now I've been somehow released from prison. I mean, I was on some list, and we are on some list at the Grayzone on YouTube, which is our primary way of communicating with our audience through live streams, like the interview we're doing now. we have 300,000 subscribers, but it's like it's so hard for us to pick up subscribers. In the beginning, we immediately surged with like 100,000 subscribers, and then it flatlined, and it flatlined in March 2020, which was when the pandemic was declared and all of these new suppression mechanisms and forms of algorithmic suppression came into play, and we were obviously targeted. We don't know why. No one explained it. We had no due process, and so it's a completely undemocratic process of silencing people that's provoking enormous amounts of outrage and this huge backlash, which I think is going to be the basis for a kind of an actual political movement.
Well, I hope it is, but I wonder to a certain extent. I was banned from the old Twitter my account was suspended. I never got an answer why. I was off for 8 months. Finally, someone said, "Why? If you really want to get back on, write to find out who their lobbyist is, chief lobbyist in Washington. Write to that person and CC your member of Congress," who in my case was Jamie Raskin, who had not yet moved, the way he has in the last couple of years. But I said, well, that's ridiculous. But I did it for the hell of it. 45 minutes later, I got an email. Good news. We've restored your Twitter account. But I had lost most of my followers somehow. Yeah. In the meantime, it seems to me now, I think there are a lot of valid criticisms of what Elon Musk is doing with Twitter. I do think it seems more likely subjectively to be elevating, harsh voices and that type of thing.
He's personally elevating them. Like he'll reply to them in order to draw engagement. Right. There's no dispute about that. And he's doing it probably for cynical, opportunistic reasons because they're opposed to his enemies. Like he's just weaponizing them against his enemies.
Right. Also, I suspect another reason is that he's an asshole, but because he does seem to be. But that's neither here nor there. And this is where I get frustrated in attempts to have conversations with some people about this. They say, well, Elon Musk, I've been writing critical pieces about Elon Musk since everybody thought he walked on water, exposing where his funding comes from, that the federal government really, helped to build and expand his empire. I don't need any lessons on what's wrong with Elon Musk. The point is that that's no justification for the practices that he was willing to stop and expose. He may have done those for terrible reasons. Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger and the other people who were involved in that, Li Fang, other people who got involved in that, going through those Twitter files, got enormous amounts of grief, as if you have to love a source or believe in everything a source has ever done in order to report on the information they just brought you. And to me, that's just part of the sort of the tribalization of politics now, where, Elon is right-leaning and this helps the Republicans. It shouldn't be about that. This should be about fundamental values that I thought people had and that I thought people used to have.
Yeah, I mean, let's remove good and bad, if possible, or even sort of political judgment from the discussion for a second. I just think it's important to understand why Elon Musk is being targeted, whereas there are other billionaires who are involved in the same kind of practices as him, who are involved in transhumanist, bizarre experiments, who rely heavily on government subsidies for their own private wealth. He's not alone. Bill Gates would be someone I would point to. Bill Gates is a sinister individual, but he's part of the regime. He plays ball with the regime. He funds the fact-checking sites. He funds the mainstream media, which in turn check any fact or check any rumor that seems to hinder Bill Gates's ambitions or paint him in a bad light. Like, for example, that he released genetically modified mosquitoes into the wild, which I believe he did. There's a fact check kind of running interference for him on that, and he funds the fact checking site. Every mainstream outlet is sponsored by Bill Gates, but it supports the overall model of these public-private partnerships, stakeholder capitalism, and the censorship industrial complex, which operates from within the shadows. Bill Gates is part of that. So you don't see Bill Gates, except to the extent that he hangs out late in the night with Jeffrey Epstein and an attractive Swedish woman. You don't see him getting bad press like Elon Musk. The attacks on Elon Musk are gratuitous because Elon Musk wants to create his own regime, which at this point is contrary to the hegemonic one, which is embedded in the democratic, sort of interwoven with the Democratic Party and the national security state, big tech, and so on. And that's why he's being attacked. He's not playing ball. And what he did with the Twitter files was the ultimate middle finger to the regime. It was something on the level of a giant WikiLeaks drop, where the public received the unprecedented transparency about the censorship industrial complex. It was proof that they were going behind the scenes, the national security state, which no one elected, and telling Twitter executives who could speak and who could not on the basis of their political views, that the First Amendment didn't matter anymore, that there was no free speech in the United States, and essentially that we are not a democracy. We're not a liberal democracy. Liberal democracy is just a marketing ploy that's used to maintain the consent of the public while they are being run by authoritarian goons dressed in, Brooks Brothers suits. That's essentially what Elon did. And Matt Taibbi, when we interviewed him at the Grayzone, he said he believed that Elon Musk actually bought Twitter for the sole purpose of releasing the Twitter files. I don't believe that. I think he has longer term ambitions there. He's hoovering up so much data. He's employing some Israeli security firm, which was founded by former Shin Bet agents to verify everyone's identity at some point. I don't know if this will happen, but there's been reports that Twitter will require everyone to submit an identification card. And this company, this firm, this Israel-based firm, will gather their identities. And then he has so much private data. So I think there are reasons to be worried about where Twitter or X is going. But the reason that Elon is being attacked in the New York Times is for an entirely different reason. And it's because he's disrupted this model, which has to be disrupted. It has to be broken, or there's you can just kiss the Constitution goodbye.
Yeah, I wrote a piece once calling social media Ma Bell with mind control. They had Ma Bell telephone that was in the 60s and so on, was a complete monopoly over telephone communications. So it was broken up. But this is much more insidious, because it's as if, with shadow banning, for example, and things like that, it's as if, well, you can place a phone call to your friend or family member, but it might just snip out certain sentences you say if it doesn't like them, or you might never know they tried to call you, or, it's that kind of level of manipulation. 300,000 people think they follow you on Twitter, thought they followed you on Twitter, but they didn't necessarily hear what you had to say. This to me is incredibly insidious. And I think at first I thought this was a lot of it was stemming from concern over using any methods, no matter how draconian, to address the spread of COVID. But now I'm beginning to think, I've started to think that this is about using the pandemic as an opportunity to get public support on the liberal side of the spectrum, especially for imposing these for much more of what you've been talking about, national security reasons, whether it's Ukraine, where we've seen history be rewritten, sort of Stalinist style, the disappearance into the memory hole of the Azov battalions, Nazi behavior or whatever, and I'm beginning to think it's actually way more sinister than what I originally thought, which was an overreach for public health reasons. But I don't know. I mean, what are your,
it was
I guess,
it was like, it was the most severe. We saw the most severe assault on civil liberties and freedom of speech under the auspices of like protecting public health. And the public health protections were themselves based on complete lies. So if you question the lies, you were told you were questioning science, which was the big brother of March 2020 through sometime in 2022 when all of the restrictions started to fade away. And you were banned. So on YouTube, you're still forced to recite large YouTube accounts who are large podcasters. For example, Jimmy Dore has over 1 million subscribers. He has a YouTube liaison, and so they tell them what they can and can't say in order to actually have certain discussions about COVID. And he can't state the fact that the COVID vaccines, the mRNA vaccines, did not prevent transmission or infection. And so he has to state a lie by the World Health Organization, which itself actually redefined what a vaccine was in order to adopt or in order to essentially promote the COVID vaccine. He has to say that they have been shown to reduce transmission and infection. And there's no proof of that. The reason why you can't say that is because the public needed to believe that if they just got vaccinated, that they could go back to work and everything would open up. And then they were told, well, we can't open up, you have to get boosted. But they needed to believe that it gave them some kind of protection in order to justify the mandates and to keep the public supporting the mandates, which were throwing people out of work, out of jobs they'd had for 20 years for refusing to comply, or preventing people from being able to be a part of society for refusing to comply. Here in DC, they were going to make 12-year-olds, school children, all get vaccinated in order to go to school. Then they realized all the schools would shut down because the vaccination rate among DC's youth was like 40%. Because why would you need that as it poses no risk to you, you're dying unless you have a 7 comorbidities. Why would a 12-year-old get that? And it doesn't prevent you from spreading it to others. So they had to kind of give up on it. But the point is, the whole regime that locked people out for refusing to comply, basically a social credit regime that was being tested during the pandemic, was based on a lie. And you were not allowed to call it out. You were not allowed to call out Fauci on social media for several years. And in fact, there is this really interesting case in Missouri where the attorney general brought a case against social media, I believe, over COVID restrictions. I'm not summarizing it properly, but the point is, through discovery, they received communications from the White House showing that they were going to, it was not just the White House, it was every department in the Biden administration was going to Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook and telling them who to ban. And they actually, on behalf of Fauci, apparently, had Instagram ban a Fauci parody account. So that was considered, you can't even make fun of Fauci. He's such a saint. So I don't know how, leftists weren't shocked by that. A lot of them just don't want to talk about this anymore. But if you had any civil libertarian bone in your body, this should have outraged you, and it should terrify you about the future when you know that the entire pandemic response was tested just months before COVID-19 first appeared, or actually maybe weeks before it first appeared, in the tabletop exercise at Johns Hopkins University, sponsored by the US and Chinese CDCs and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Event.
That is true. And I know we're out of time, and I wish I didn't know a couple of things I know now, but in a sense, I was pro-mandate through, most of that time. I didn't get angry until I saw that they'd actually suppressed factually correct information about the very small percentage of people who get side effects from the vaccine. Obviously all of that has to be put in context. My doctors have to do that if they're going to operate on me, right? They have to tell me what the risks are. So I didn't get mad until then, but then I did start looking into it, and I was not happy with what I found, which is a huge subject to open up just as we run out of time.
I would like to see people, instead of self-lacerating and saying I was wrong, to actually just do some reflecting on what we lived through, because it's not going away. Our overlords in the national security state and big tech and the financial oligarchy that they work for, what they saw was that most of the public complied with these lockdown orders without any second thought, and that the part of the public that refused to comply was easily branded as essentially terrorists and right-wing hooligans. So why shouldn't they be able to do it again? And also, I know we're wrapping up, but I wanted to bring up this whole this new drama that's erupted on Twitter or X around the Anti-Defamation League, where Elon Musk has announced that he's suing the Anti-Defamation League. And it is a fact that the Anti-Defamation League, which is really a defamation league, which exaggerates anti-Semitism or downplays it in the case of the Azov Battalion in Ukraine, but exaggerates it in order to rake in funding and justify its own existence and destroy the reputations of people who are not anti-Semites, largely people who campaign for the dignity and rights of Palestinians. That this organization is finally facing elite pressure because it got involved in the censorship industrial complex. It started putting its staff in Silicon Valley and working hand in glove with the DHS and FBI, and doing so as a unelected representative of all American Jews. And I don't consider them representative of me, and I know many, many Jews who do not, but they've created this very dangerous scenario where an ethnic lobbying group, pressure group, has come in as part of to censor people without any due process. And what they've actually done there, now that they're facing elite pushback, is increase anti-Semitism, because people are now holding the Jews responsible for censorship. And that's very dangerous. And
I know you've been called a self-hating Jew. So have I, to which I finally started answering, no, but I'm becoming a you-hating Jew to the people who say that to me. But unfortunately, Max, we're going to have to leave it there. But as always, great talking with you. I'm glad you guys landed on your feet with this draconian censorship. Again, my guest, Max Blumenthal of the Grayzone at thegrayzone.com. And you can find them on YouTube as well, at least as of this moment. And Max, as always, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for all the support, RJ, and thanks for having me on.
You bet. And we'll be right back after this. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.